should I not do to Charles Manson what I don't want him to do to me? Well, if you see what I mean. I mean, should we say, let's do to Charles Manson what we wouldn't want done to ourselves? Obviously not. It's just like the contradiction between the Old and the New Testaments. The Old Testament says an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, which would lead to a very eyeless and toothless world. And then the Nazarene says, you can't condemn anyone unless you can cast the first stone. Actually, that bit was knitted into the Bible quite late and is almost certainly a fabrication. But it's believed in by many Christians who, as you know, will believe practically anything. But if you can't condemn anyone without being yourself without sin, then we can't even arrest Charles Manson unless we were sinless ourselves. So these moral absolutes are actually more full of moral relativism than you might think. And the reason people want there to be absolutes is this. They want there to be an absolute authority who can give them to you. Because wouldn't that save you all the trouble of thinking out ethics for yourself? Which is where I started. Why not take that chance? More enjoyable, less subject to appalling commandments to stone witches and murder homosexuals
and all the rest.
Yeah, all that.
Rabbi, universal morality, and if there is the,
I'm not sure that Christopher said whether he believes in a universal morality, but yes, someone who believes in God assumes that there is a universal morality, but also assumes that it's very hard, and it's not that the 613 mitzvot instantiate universal morality. And moral reasoning, as far as I know, is certainly in other traditions, but obviously in Judaism, is an essential part of the Jewish tradition. It's not that you get out of thinking by being part of the Jewish tradition. In fact, questioning, reasoning, wondering, thinking, objecting is an essential part of Judaism. Anybody who studies Talmud knows it's filled with objections and questions. But the assumption is that there actually is a right and a wrong in any given case. If all human beings are evolved primates, there's not a right and a wrong. There's a better and a worse. There's a more powerful and less powerful. Nietzsche was exactly right. If God is dead, then power is all that matters. Because ultimately, there isn't a right and a wrong. There's something that promotes your interest and something that negates your interest. But I don't believe that.
Excuse me, do you or do you not believe that human beings are evolved primates?
Yes. But I also believe. I said if all they are. I said if all they are is evolved primates, as opposed to evolved primates who have a spark of the eternal in them, which I believe we do.
Question.
Two questions for Mr. Hitchens. The first one is, I was taught by a physics professor that if you go back to the Big Bang, beginning of the universe, in the first 1 to the 61st of the first second, the entire universe is in a tiny amount of space, and at that size, space and time can cross. And his point was that the whole universe came into existence out of a hiccup in the space-time warp, and therefore it's just kind of a big accident that we were here. And so my question is the same one that I posed to him that day: why is there a space-time warp? Which leads me to the second question, which is, wouldn't it make more sense that there would be nothing? Should be no universe, there should be no space-time warp, there should be none of us, and unless we're hooked into the Matrix right now, we seem to be here. And so...
You take that as an argument for God, is that what you're saying?
For something. There's a great mystery at the core of the universe, and then why are we here is the second question, to argue those out.
Okay, thank you very much.
Well, I'd commend to you someone who's much more expert on this subject. I started by mentioning Lawrence Krauss's lecture on a whole universe from nothing. But where's the grandeur, where's the divinity in the hiccup? And who produces the hiccupper? All you get from this is an infinite regression. Who creates this creator? It gets you nowhere. And again, if you do make the assumption, which I can't dispute or certainly cannot refute, that there is a first cause or an uncaused cause, it still doesn't mean that there's a God who takes sides, answers prayers, enjoins morals.
I didn't ask about that.
No.
I didn't.
So I'm afraid you compel me to somewhat to repeat myself.
Can I just ask a quick question
Yes.
about what you just said? If it's an assumption that you can't refute, which I understand, I think everybody here would say you can't prove that there's not a God, but that doesn't mean that there is one. But if it's an assumption that you can't refute, why is it that when someone says, I believe that it is true, do you say they're lying?
Have I said that they're lying?
You said to me, when someone stands at the...
I say
when you lie...
Someone
yes.
someone who goes to tell a child that if they don't behave well, they'll go to hell.
That wasn't the example that we
someone
used.
who goes to the deathbed
and says that I believe that there's a world other than this one.
You're going to a better place is I think, a charlatan, a nauseating charlatan.
I'll let it.
And the question is whether religious people at the highest level have a better understanding of themselves than people who claim to be atheists. And in particular, we can ask the question, is Mr. Hitchens himself really as great an atheist as he claims?
He's pretty good. Yeah, he's pretty good.
Mr. Hitchens, are you a closet believer?
No, a point of agreement between the rabbi and myself is that the human species, mammalian, primate, so on, though it undoubtedly is, and made out of the dust of exploded suns, does have a need for, I would say, the transcendent, would be one word, the numinous, even the ecstatic. Wouldn't trust anyone who hadn't felt this. And it has obviously to do with landscape, light, music, love, and I think also a permanent awareness of the transience of all things, and the melancholy that invests all this. So it isn't just gaping happily at sunset while listening to music. You're doing that knowing that it can't last for very long. Very important part of the awareness. People who didn't have this would, I think, be beyond autistic. But there's no need for the supernatural in this at all. There is no supernatural dimension of which this gives you a share. And yes, of course, for poetry and literature, we are rather stuck with the pathetic fallacy, if you know what I mean. The pathetic fallacy is giving human attributes to material things. So we're tempted to do that too.
Rabbi, can Hitchens be saved?
Just on the word evil, though, I personally find it a word you absolutely have to have. I decided this in Iraq, as a matter of fact, after I'd seen the Saddam Hussein's attempt with chemical weapons to destroy the Kurdish people of northern Iraq, and seen the, as it were, the stench of evil. I thought, now, everything else you can say about Saddam Hussein, psychopathic dictator, mass murderer, genocidalist, bad guy, as some people used to call him, things of this kind, wasn't up to it. There was a surplus value to totalitarianism, a sort of a numinous bit, a shimmer around it, that meant that evil is a word we could not do without.
Do you see in he who speaks up for the numinous the possibility of belief? Do you smell a potential person of faith in Hitchens, or no way, no how?
I think, no, I mean, to be perfectly honest and not to make a cheap joke about it, I think that Christopher is a person of tremendous, impressive faith. Not the faith that I have at all, but faith in justice, faith in goodness. I mean, what he's done with much of his life is, I think, really awe-inspiring. That doesn't mean for a minute that I think that he's being dishonest about his lack of faith in the things that I believe, but does he have faith in a different sense? Absolutely.
Can we do more? Yes?
Mr. Hitchens, you are likely the world's most charming, roguish, and enlightened atheist, and I love you for that. But as a Sufi Muslim, I'm very ruffled by the title of your book. Of all the titles that you likely had at your disposal, did you have to settle for the literal negation of Allahu Akbar?
Yes.
I thought so. Thank you for that question. Thank you. Oh, it's a very good question, and I'm glad. I wanted to come back to it. Why?
Yeah. As I've said, I think that all religions are wrong in the same way, in that they privilege faith over reason, but they're not all equally bad in the same way all the time. I mean, if I'd been writing in the 1930s, I would certainly have said that the Roman Catholic Church was the most dangerous religion in the world because of its open alliance with fascism and anti-Semitism, which the damage from that our culture has never recovered from and never will. But at the moment, it's very clear to me that the most toxic form that religion takes is the Islamic form. The horrible idea of wanting to end up with Sharia, with a religion-governed state, a state of religious law, and that the best means of getting there is jihad, holy war, and that Muslims have a special right to feel aggrieved enough to demand this, I think is absolute obscene wickedness, and I think their religion is nonsense. And
in its entirety?
In its entirety.